Hey everyone, good evening. Oh my goodness, I had so much technical issues in the beginning of it. I couldn't get the video to play. I'm like,
But
why isn't it playing? Oh, so how are you doing today, Philip?
I'm good. So, is that little girl at the end with the men hanging in the trees too much? No, I don't think so. I love it.
I don't think so. Oh my goodness, I am looking forward to tonight. I don't know about you, but I've been looking forward to this one for a while because I know I talked to
Yes.
Lisa about it months ago,
She
and
always
this
gives such
is.
great presentations and stuff that I've never even heard of before. So,
And she gives a
always
different
cool.
insight into it. So it's not your
Yeah,
standard, what we would, do in a Google search.
exactly.
So I won't keep her waiting too much longer, but we already do have Bob joining us. Welcome,
Hey,
Bob.
Bob.
He says, hey, and then Robin.
Hey,
And oh, look at
Robin.
that. Philip is watching.
I'm two places at once.
I know. Yeah. We kind of have to be. We run the show on our own. One of these days we'll get a producer.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm going to actually bring the Haunted Librarian in. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me again. I love doing presentations here.
Well, you do them so well, and we're glad that you want to do them with us. So,
Oh, well, thank you.
Exactly.
Yay.
And we truly do appreciate it. And I know most of our viewers know who you are because you're a return guest. I always make sure that I fit you in, even though I plan a year in advance. I always make sure I get you in here and there. But can you just kind of let everybody know who you are?
Definitely. Well, I am Lisa Schnurr, and I blog as the Haunted Librarian at thehauntedlibrarian.com. And I used to be really, really active. And then I'm kind of like on a sabbatical. And I know last time I was here, I had said that I would be blogging more, and I'm blogging less. Because,
I'm not time in the day.
There isn't a lot of time. And my problem is I get so deep into the rabbit holes, like with the stories that I'm going to talk about tonight, that it's like by the time I'm through writing everything, I can't make it like a little blog. I mean, so many of these stories should be in books.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one that Heather will write.
We can collaborate.
We'll have to get in line, but yeah, we could work on one together.
Oh, geez, right? Because I think tonight some of them you're gonna know about, but some of them you're not. And I'm hoping, I'm not gonna promise that some of these will make it to a blog. I have a few favorites, and I am always honored when you message me and ask me to be on the show. So thank you. Thank you for keep having me.
And I know tonight's topic is dark tourism. Do you go into the definition of dark tourism in your presentation?
I do.
Okay, because if you didn't, I wanted to make sure we covered that before we started it.
Definitely.
Yeah, when I was doing the graphic, I'm like, explain to me exactly the premise of this, because I had an idea, but I wasn't sure. And so you sent me the description. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and it's and everybody has a different take on the definition, and so mine is going to be a little bit all over the place because I want to touch a little here, a little there, and but it's just it's so fascinating.
I know last time when you were on, we actually came up with a topic. We were just kind of throwing ideas out at the end. What can we cover the next time you're on the show? And that was the one we came up with.
That's right. And I think this is one that is just going to be, I think it's going to have a lot of people thinking.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And maybe try.
Yeah. And before we start the presentation, if there's anything anyone wants the Haunted Librarian to do, I do have a presentation slot open later this year that I'll make sure I get her in. So comment with what you want her to cover in the future, and maybe we'll have a topic before the end of the show again.
Oh, most definitely. Thank you. So people can find my old blogs at thehauntedlibrarian.com and possibly some new ones. I blog about paranormal research, paranormal things, some paranormal news. It's really what I'm interested in, so it's incredibly eclectic. It's just because I am so fascinated with so many things, and I try to do a different take on things because there are a lot of people writing about the paranormal, and so I want people to actually come to the site, read something, or watch a presentation and leave with something they didn't know. And so I try to find that hidden nugget.
Yeah, but you don't sensationalize it and add all the creepy, scary crap, like a TV show. It's just really good, precise, exciting, interesting information, which is what I like, the way you write it and put it together.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't because I don't want to feed into that, because all it does is it just delegitimizes what all we do. And all it does is it hurts us, because unfortunately that's what people are looking for, to negate the paranormal, or to, and it's not skeptics, because it's fine to be skeptical, and I mean, to have a scientific mind, an inquiring mind, those are good things. But there are people who, come at it with, nope, doesn't exist. This is this. And so, if you do offer that, or you do align yourself with a para scammer, then that becomes you. And that becomes that's just not what I'm going to do. So, yeah. I know, I'm excited. Can you tell?
I guess we're ready whenever you are.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Philip has questions before we start.
No, I just want everyone, if you haven't gone to her website, the Haunted Librarian, go. It's just so beautifully done. I've always told you that, because I just think it's so well put together, and it's not loaded down with junk, like so many websites are. You got to sift through it, and you just want to read something, but you got to go through all the other. Yours is just so well put together. So congrats on.
Thank you.
I don't know if you did it or you had it done, but it's done well.
It's actually the hosting site, WordPress, and I don't add the widgets because I'm not monetizing it. It's not, so there aren't the ads, there aren't the the windows that pop up. It's just storytelling.
Yeah, it's nice.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'll sit back and relax.
Okay. Do you have to share it's been so long that I've forgotten.
We always do that. How do you do this again?
Yeah, I just present, right? Yeah, there we go.
I think so. Yeah, present, and then.
Yeah.
I think if you have videos, you have to do a certain way.
There we go. And can you see the dark tourism?
No.
I see it. I didn't know if you wanted me to share it yet. There we go.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Yay.
Awesome. Well, here we go.
Well, if you need us, we'll be backstage. So just holler for us.
Well, thank you. And if you need to interrupt me with a question I can't see, because I only have the one monitor, I should actually get the second one hooked up so I can see that. So feel free.
Okay.
Don't mind at all. So here we go, talking about dark tourism. And so I am going to define it. So the term dark tourism was coined in 1996. And it really has been here a long time. It has ancient implications, and it used to be called heritage tourism. And so some of the sites I'm going to talk about and destinations tonight are heritage sites, and it's heritage tourism. It is a subgenre of the tourism industry, and it's defined by having a place where a death occurred. So thanatourism, and this is a term coined by Anthony Seton, and you travel to a destination, a place where death occurred. It doesn't mean that it's haunted. And so I'll talk about that when I talk about some of the destinations tonight. Is not necessarily haunted. They may be haunted. We don't know, or we do know, because there are stories around some of them, because some of my locations are incredibly well known. But it's where death occurred, great tragedy occurred. And so there is a wide spectrum as to locations that can be considered dark tourism. So for instance, the Holocaust concentration camps, that's dark tourism because death happened there, tragedy happened. I'm not going to talk about those sites because I couldn't do them justice. I'm not an expert in those sites. I have great reverence for those sites, and I'm not looking to exploit them in terms of dark tourism. And I don't think they are exploited for the most part. When people visit those sites, you should be very respectful. These are locations where death has occurred, might have some hauntings to it, may not, but it is all about the money, honey. Money, money, money. And when you look at some of the sites and you think about some of the sites, you really should consider dark tourism. It happens everywhere. The state of Florida has a lot of dark tourism. Every state does. Every country does. And so this is a huge and very profitable industry. It is 7.6 trillion, that's with the T, dollar industry, and it grows 3% annually. And so people want to go back to these destinations because of the history, to know the history. That's the heritage part. But they go back to the beginning. I do want to do my shameful plug that some of these locations you can actually watch on Tubi. Tubi has the documentary Scariest Places in the World. And it was presented on Tubi, which is a free TV and movie site with some ads. You do have to sit through some ads. And there's the link for it from 2023. And I was very honored to be one of their experts on the show. And this is a horrible screen capture of me. But I actually think it's kind of fun. My glasses reflected the light. So you see me in my glasses now, but they couldn't have me in my glasses. And so I was slightly blind when I was actually presenting. But go watch it. It's fun. And it's the top 10 scariest places in the world. Most of them, if not all of them, are well known. And we're going to start with one of them. Going back to the beginning. 2609 BCE, right? Ancient Egypt, the pyramids of Giza. And so this is Egypt. Don't mind the stars. I rated them 4 because they're actually all 5 stars in my book, but I'm just kind of playing with you to go and experience them and then let me know if it's a 5-star or not. The pyramids are the 9th visited destination in the world. And that's pretty big. In 2023, they experienced 14.9 million visitors. And that's an increase. And it accounts for 12% of Egypt's GDP, which is their national budget, towards their budget. So the pyramids, the Great Pyramid of Giza is the largest Egyptian pyramid, and it is the tomb of Khufu. He's the 4th dynasty pharaoh. But the interesting part of it is that no one has found his body. It was built in the early 26th century, 27 years of labor, and there was anywhere between 27 years it took to build. Anywhere between 20,000 to 100,000 men built this. And it is one of the oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. When you go, it's people don't realize you see the pyramids and you think that it's vast deserts. Actually, Egypt has built up around the pyramids. And so when you see it actually from drone footage or from the air, the town is creeping closer, which is kind of a nice juxtaposition between the ancient pyramids and the town. But the facts of it are 2.3 million blocks of stone were cut, transported, and assembled. And this brings about a few conspiracy theories, right? How did people get the blocks there? I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but it is a rabbit hole. It is a 5.75 million ton structure, and it's 481 feet tall. There isn't this consensus on how it was built. The most plausible is that they use sloping and encircling embankment that rose with materials added. And so they would build up, bring it in, build up some more dirt, bring it in. And so it would rise as they were building each level. And that was easy to do when you had 100,000 men. Okay. There's this also in popular culture, the belief that they were built by slaves. And this is not necessarily true. But it was, mummies are big business, big business. And it's the most popular draw for museums worldwide. And they're actually moving away from using the word mummies. Instead, they're calling them by the actual name if they know who the mummified person was, or they say mummified remains. And so it's really, we're trying to be respectful in naming them. And so they do this also to show that they were real human beings, and not only respect, but also for others who were mummified to give those remains back to their people. And so popular culture, think of your movies. The Mummy, the Mummy's Curse. This is where you see the number one hard theme out there. And so Mummy Mania predates to 1922, before when Howard Carter found who? King Tut, 1922, in the Valley of the Kings. In the 19th century, there were actually mummy, and I'm going to use the word mummy probably inappropriately. I mean mummified remains. But there were these unwrapping parties where they were big business and they were bought and sold, and people would buy them. They would ship them over here. And there's a wonderful blog that I wrote about the mummies that used to be housed under Tulane University's football stadium. And so people would have this big dinner, or they would do drinks and light snacks, hors d'oeuvres, and then they would come into the drawing room and the mummified remains would be unwrapped. And this was what the wealthy class did. And so the mummy is a popular and profitable trope. So we have 1932, Boris Karloff with the motion picture, The Mummy. And since then, we get remakes all the time. We get this theme, and it just goes through our popular culture, and it's always tied to a mummy's curse. And so is there a curse at the pyramid, at the Great Pyramid? Well, it depends, right? I think it's more interesting, in my perspective, that we haven't found his body, because Khufu, or he also is known as Cheops, he was this Egyptian monarch, second pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. He's supposedly buried in the Great Pyramid, but we don't know. We don't know how he died. The cause of death is unknown. There are claims that his body was mummified and placed into a sarcophagus located in the king's chamber, which is inside the pyramid. But when the king's chamber was located, it was empty. And it wasn't empty because there was grave robbing. It was just empty. And so they thought he was stolen. And so all of these decades, they've been saying that it was grave robbery, he was stolen. But in the pyramid, there are 3 rooms. There's the queen's chamber for the vault with the king's riches. There's the king's chamber, which is supposed to have the king, and then the grand gallery. But recently, within the last 2 years, they've the technology for scanning deep into the ground penetrating lasers found a hidden chamber. And so there's this hidden interior corridor above the main entrance that was possibly built to redistribute the weight so that the pyramid didn't fall. But there's this chamber underneath it, and they don't know who's buried there. And so this is like the great mystery might be solved. Are the pyramids haunted? Some say that there are hauntings. Like I said, the city is actually built up around the pyramids, and it's creeping closer. And so people who live in the city actually hear noises. They see lights at night. They think the lights are these floating ghosts that they see clothed in not only old attire, but they see them in the Victorian Howard Carter 1920s attire. And so that's kind of interesting and fascinating, because that was the heyday of kind of just stealing the riches, or stealing all the everything that's in the pyramids, or coming in and taking it taking it away from Egypt. And so the people there think that it's the ghosts are trying to scare people away. But we're also seeing now that different countries are actually giving back the relics to Egypt. And so this is a dark tourism location because one, it's immensely popular. Two, it dates back so long ago that there was death. Workers died there. We have the curse of the mummy. We have Howard Carter with King Tut and King Tut's, the mystery surrounding his death. And there's actually a little side note. Nova has a fabulous, well, semi-fabulous documentary on King Tut where they actually scan. They don't even have to go into, but they use the laser scans to scan his skull. And they've recreated his skull so you can actually see what King Tut looked like. And it's not what the sarcophagus looks like, which is kind of interesting. So Pyramids of Giza, that's our first place. But let's get into some really different places because the pyramids, okay, we learned about the pyramids growing up, right? Well, most of us did in history classes, but how many of us knew about the Capuchin catacombs? The Capuchin catacombs are in Palermo, Italy, and I love the Capuchin catacombs because I am very big into genealogy and my family history, and I can actually now take my dad's paternal line back to Palermo. And I'm like, so I'm like, this to me would be just like wonderful if like, I guess it sounds weird, maybe. Ooh, I don't know. If like relatives are buried there because the catacombs are very popular. Over 200,000 visitors annually. It takes about 1 hour to tour. The entrance fee is very inexpensive, €3. A tour with a tour guide is around $32. It starts at US dollars for 1 hour. Book in advance because they fill up fast. But the number one rule, no photography permitted inside. And so you can go on YouTube and you can see people who have snuck cameras in. And it's like, I'm not really, I would rather see the official photography of it and again, be respectful. That's gonna be a running theme in the presentation tonight. But the catacombs date back to 1534. And this is the place where the living meet the dead. And it's a museum of death because what it is exactly what you see here. You see the mummified remains of people who lived in and around Palermo. But it actually started with, oh, I didn't mean to keep that there. You can use presentation media. Should have taken that out. That's an oops. But this started out with monastery. And so the Capuchin friars arrived in Palermo in 1534. And just like with everybody, they died and they had a simple cemetery. The Capuchin monks were very simple people. Their cemetery filled up. And so they needed a new place. And so they prayed really hard about it. And this opening in the ground opened up behind their altar. And the first mummified monk to be buried was Brother Silvestro in 1599. And the monks actually came up with a different where they take, they take all the organs out, they wrap the body in the cloth. What they do is very different because they're mummifying underground. These bodies are actually dehydrated and they place the bodies on racks where all of the liquid is removed from the body. Some of them are washed with vinegar. Some of them are embalmed. It depended on who was doing what. And there's at least one little girl on the lower left who was sealed in a glass cabinet. And so it was intended for the deceased friars. And it became then a symbol of wealth to be buried in the catacombs. It became a business. And so they started by accepting donations. And with your donation, you got different varied activities. And so I'm going to go back to the other where you can see how the bodies, the mummified remains are in clothing. Well, if you gave a little bit more money, the clothing of your deceased relative could change out seasonally. And so the family continued to pay and the deceased remained. If the family stopped paying, the body then became shelved and taken off display. In 1871, Brother Ricardo was the last friar to be interred, and it still continued with these family donations until 1939 was the last internment. But the probably the most famous internment is of little Rosalia, who is down in the lower left-hand corner. And Rosalia Lombardo was almost 2 years old when she died. And that is how she looks today. Because of this mummification process, she was perfectly preserved. And so she's known as Sleeping Beauty. She's the world's most beautiful mummy. And she was preserved by Professor Alfredo Salafia, who came up with a process. He enhanced the process of preserving her. Her father was devastated when she died. And we believe that she died of pneumonia. And the grief just overtook him. And so he donated a lot of money to have her in this coffin, the glass coffin. So at the Capuchin catacombs, there are over 8,000 corpses. 1,252 mummies line the wall. And then of that, 160 plus, so over 160 are children. And so initially the halls were divided. So this is subterranean, and the halls were divided by male, female, virgins, children, priests, and monks, professionals. And so depending on your livelihood, depending on how much you donated, you would be placed in a different area. And it is the largest collection of mummified remains in Europe. And of the children, 41 of them were accessible to adults, or to researchers rather. And so researchers have been researching this process that Professor Salafia came up with. And he was a chemist. And the problem is that, or not the problem, but he took meticulous notes and about what he did. And she's just beautifully preserved. And that was his process. But now there's the Sicily Mummy Project, and it was created in 2007, where the researchers are creating profiles of the mummified remains. Mummies are being x-rayed and CT scans made. And like I said, the advances in it's not invasive now for the laser to go through, that they can start possibly identifying who these remains belong to. And with DNA coming along, they might be able to create DNA profiles as well. So the difference between mummified mummies of Egyptian time and the Capuchin catacombs, and also, like, if you know the bog bodies, right? The farmer falls into the bog, he dies, and her body is perfectly preserved. There are 3 types of mummification. So you have natural mummification, which is based on the dehydration, and it's a year-long process. So, I mean, they would, the people who are interred here, it took a year for them to be ready to be able to go out on display. And bathed in vinegar, they're stuffed with hay. And so you can see like some of the body is kind of falling in. The second is the artificial, and that's what the Egyptian mummies did. That was the embalming. And so that's when they inject the chemicals, and that makes the body more human-like or alive-like. And then there's the third type, which is the arsenic baths. And these were during the epidemics, when you would have somebody who died from smallpox, measles, Black Death, and they would have an arsenic bath so that they could kill the contagion. And I don't even know if I said that right, but the disease. And so the Capuchin catacombs, they are natural with that dehydration process. So some of you are wondering, are they haunted? I don't think they're haunted as much as they're just creepy, right? This is a high creepy factor right here. And it's kind of like if you're going in the catacombs in Paris, which is not on the list tonight. And it's kind of creepy. And it's kind of, when we look at people who are dressed in clothing that we identify as clothing that we would wear, suits and dresses, changed out seasonally, it's very uncomfortable, because then we start contemplating death, which a lot of these places also are something to think about. And so haunted, I don't know. Ghoulish, definitely. How about some Black Plague? And so speaking of death and the arsenic baths, we have Mary King's Close. And Mary King's Close is located in Edinburgh, Scotland. And it gets 3.5 million visitors since it opened in 2003. And of course, COVID brought the numbers down for those years, but it is actually owned and operated by a private company. In 2022, 46% of the visitors were international. Of that, 15% were American. Last year, they saw increasing tourism. They had 257,000 visitors. Tickets are £16 for children, or $22.50 British pounds for adults. And so Mary King's Close is fabulous. This is 1635. And you'll notice a trend here too. We're kind of going along a timeline. So we're progressing. But Mary King's Close is also famous because of the Black Death and the plague. Mary King was actually a real person. And so a close is just a Scottish word for alleyway. And you can see here's a picture of what it looks like. They have recreated to look like back in the 1600s, and the railing wasn't there, but they were enclosed alleyways. And so just think about that, multi-story enclosed alleyways. And we have a nice little diagram here. Oh crap, I didn't take that out either. Please excuse my little faux pas there. But anyhow, focus on the top picture where you can see it's a diorama. And so it's sliced so that you can see the different levels. And the poorest of Edinburgh lived on the bottom. The more wealthy you were, you moved up. And moving up means also fresh air. And these were enclosed. And so it is in the old town. It is off of the High Street, which is what they call their main street, part of the Royal Mile. And there are a lot of closes. And so the close are just alleyways that are gated off with courtyards. They're private property. And so Mary King, real person, not related to the king. King was her actual last name. She was a fabric merchant. And so she became a widow at a young age. And when her husband died, she and her children moved to the close. And it was actually called something else. And I'm trying to see where my note was. It was called something else. But she was very, very well known, very well liked, very much definitely gave back to the people who lived within this. It's like a little town enclosed. And she and her children lived there. She opened up on the High Street, which would be on the right side of the picture of the tall building. That would be where your shops were, so people would enter from the outside. So she had a fabric shop, and then she and her family lived above it. And so she lived there. She died there. And she actually died before the Black Death hit. And so now, I don't mean to jump around, but I got to save that thought because it's kind of neat. But we have Mary King dying, and she died in a few years before the Black Death peaked. like 5 years or 10 years before. So in 1645, the plague breaks out. So many people were killed, so many people. And we think of the Black Plague and we identify it with the plague doctors, right? So that's the lower left-hand picture. We have the plague doctor. And the plague, they thought back then, was actually transferred by fleas. And they didn't realize that it was an airborne disease. And so they didn't really do a lot to help it, because airborne, underground, enclosed, close, man, it just spread, right? And so Dr. George Ray, he was appointed on June 13th, 1645, as the official plague doctor. He was their second plague doctor, because the first plague doctor didn't wear the plague doctor outfit that we see here, and he died from the plague. And so George Ray came up with a contract with Edinburgh to pay him. He was to get 1,200 pounds per year, or 100 pounds a month, to be the plague doctor. And what he did was, he didn't know that it was airborne, but he came up with this idea that if he protected himself, full body protection, then he had a better chance of living. And so he dressed in the leather cloak to keep the fleas off of him. He had the boots to prevent the rat bites. He had this bird-like mask because of the smell of death in this enclosed area was just putrid. And so he would stuff that with herbs or flowers to kind of conceal it. And this is the outfit that he came up with. And so he really saved a lot of people. There is this urban legend that people were walled off in the close, and they weren't. People left the close. If they didn't have the plague, they left. And so they didn't wall off, but unfortunately the plague killed a lot of people very quickly. And so the town actually engaged in this contract with Ray because the first doctor died. And so they figured, this guy's not going to make it. And so that's why they were going to pay him. This is a lot of money back then, right? And he survived the plague. And he actually had to sue to be paid, and they never paid him. He died without being paid. And it's just horrible. But there aren't 30 residents who were walled up behind this brick wall, but there is this one ghost. And that's the third picture. Those are dolls that are left to the ghost. And this is Annie's ghost. And so Annie is a little girl who came through in 1992 to a Japanese psychic named Eiko Gibbo. And I probably do not have a correct pronunciation for that, but she was very famous, and she visited the close. And when she walked to this area, she saw this little girl, the ghost of the little girl in the corner. And she asked the girl what her name was. And the response was Annie. And the girl was crying. And she surmised that it was a possible plague victim. And she announced that to make the girl stop crying, to give her a doll. And so then people started bringing dolls. And so this is the altar that was created for Annie. And this is called Annie's room. The close actually still had people residing in it after the 1900s. And so 1902 saw the last resident leaving. He was actually forced out because they were going to condemn it, close it down. And so Andrew Chesney was the last person to leave. And he just, he was going to stay there as long as he could. So now we have 1902, the close closes, it's boarded up, and it's sealed off. jump to 2003, so 101 years later, and this company purchased it, and it's Continuum Attractions purchased it, actually opened it up. They do tours. They are the people who regulate and have monetized the close for people to look at. It's very interesting. They have which I love, at a lot of attractions and museums. I love the museum, the gift store. And so what they sell are the Plague Doctor ducks. And I don't have one. So I did not visit there it wasn't open, when I was in Scotland all those years ago. But next time I do go, because it is on my bucket list, I am going to get a Plague Duck tour, which is a rubber ducky in the plague costume. So you're wondering, I know some of you are wondering, is it haunted? How could it not be, in a way, right? You just have all this death, all this tragedy. This is dark tourism because it's a reminder of how the city lived. When you had people living in close quarters, you have this horrible disease. It's airborne. It spreads rapidly, but not all of the ghosts are or go back to the time of the plague. So we have in 1685, I love this story. Thomas Colehart was a lawyer, and he and his family resided in the close. And his wife was a believer. She was like, yes, ghosts exist. And she would describe to her husband what she would see. And so she would see disembodied limbs. She saw a phantom child. She even saw the ghost of a dog. And they described the dog as this gruesome dog. And she saw the dog chasing a ghost cat one time. And the husband did not believe her until he saw the dog sitting in his chair. And would you believe they never moved out? They stayed there. Which is incredible. So that is Mary King's Close. We could talk about Dracula's castle. We could talk about, just other places for dark tourism. But one of the most unique locations that I didn't really know a lot about until I did the show, Scariest Places in the World, was Hashima Island. And this translates as Battleship Island, because when you look at it from the sky, it actually looks like a battleship. And so this is in Japan. It is abandoned. This is what it looks like today. It has 200,000 visitors annually. The tour takes 3 hours because you actually can only get there by boat. So you're taken over by boat. You cannot tour the entire island. You can only see a portion of the island. And the prices seem expensive when you look at 3,910 to 5,810 yen, but it's actually $26 US to $39, which I think is inexpensive, right? The island was actually an experiment, and everybody who resided on the island lived and worked on the island. And it was founded in 1887, and it's 16 acres. It is 8 nautical miles off of Nagasaki. And it, like I said, it is abandoned today. But underneath the island, they found coal. And it was underwater coal mines. And they go through tunnels to be able to get it. And of course, coal meant money. And the company decided, how do we profit the most? Well, let's build a city on the island so our workers can live and work here. And they worked in dangerous conditions, very dangerous conditions, because it's underwater mining. And so they removed, over the time period that it was active, 15.7 million tons of coal. And it peaked, the coal production peaked in 1959. And that's when the population was over 5,000 people. So look at this island. And this is a pretty good shot of the island, but we can see the island there. And there's the aerial view of it. 5,000 people lived on this island, which to me is just amazing. This is like almost tenement housing, maybe. I don't know. But you can see it's very well thought out. They have the hospital, sports grounds, they had schools. They had a hospital, cafeteria. These are the apartments. The split screen photo that I have here for you is what it was in back in the 1950s and what it is today. And so it actually is a World Heritage Site now, and which has caused a little bit of consternation from the history of it, because even though it wasn't, these were paid workers, it wasn't always so on the island. And they, like I said, they were mining coal. But when the war started in the 1930s to 1945, they moved the families off the island, and it actually became a prison for conscripted Korean and Chinese prisoners. It was forced labor, and they were forced to do this labor on the island in dangerous conditions, mining this coal. Many people died. Accidents, malnutrition, exhaustion. And so they don't actually have precise records. So it's the range of deaths on the island range from 137 upwards to 1,300 people died. It's just horrible. And so when the location came up for nomination as a heritage site, Japan didn't apologize for what happened there. And so again, that caused people to be very mad about it. In 2002, by this time, Mitsubishi owns it. And so that's the big company who was profiting through they bought it in 1890, made a lot of money. But in 2002, they voluntarily transferred the property to a town to take care of. And in August of 2005, journalists were permitted on the island. And the island actually is sectioned off. You arrive at Dolphin Pier here, and then just the left side is really where you can go. And that's it. Because it is in rapid decay. It is not maintained. The buildings are unsafe and so forth. In 2009 is when tourism started on the island, and 95% of the island is off limits. It's reclaimed by nature. There's no electricity. So it's actually also considered eco-tourism. So that's ecological tourism, which is another subgenre of tourism. And so people go there to see what happens when you leave areas left to nature. And so this is what happens is on the split screen picture on the right-hand side, trees grow, nature persists and moves on. But it was considered jail island or hell island. And the records that show they can identify 138 people who died there. And it's broken down into Korean and Chinese people who died between 1925 and 1945. That's the forced labor. That was the wartime labor that was forced to work. Residents in Japan call this Ghost Island because at night they report seeing lights flickering. And again, there's no electricity. So they're wondering, where the light's coming from. They also hear strange noises, which are carried over the water into Nagasaki. People who walk the island, who visit there, feel the sensation of being touched or someone watching them. You might have seen the island because in 2012, it actually makes an appearance in James Bond Skyfall. And this is the lair of the villain in Skyfall. It's a beautiful place. But now we're going to flip to the US, to the Ridges. And the Ridges is, this is a picture, modern day picture of the Ridges. It was actually called several names, at least 8 names. Most people know it as the Athens Lunatic Asylum. And it's in Athens, Ohio. It is now owned by Ohio University, not Ohio State University. This is why you don't go to Wikipedia for your information. You cannot merely show up and visit this location. You must take an organized tour, and the tours now do not focus on ghost tours unless it's Halloween, special event kind of thing. The buildings are actually used for their museum, offices, and so forth. But we're jumping to 1868, and we are in Athens, Ohio. And this started out as a lunatic asylum, sanitarium. And it was built in 1868 according to the Dr. Thomas Kirkbride method. And Kirkbride, I have a blog on Kirkbride from another location, because his prevailing theory of the day was that people who would be housed at these asylums, dropped off or committed there, they needed air. So they were built with open areas for people to get exposure to air, get exposure to sunlight. They would have different wings for women and men. And it quickly became unable to do because of money. And so actually all of these asylums were overcrowded because it was just not possible to have this atmosphere. But we have the Ridges. And so here are some historic pictures of the lunatic asylum back in the day. And you can see it, beautiful buildings. And so the hallways actually would end with these turrets, which is important to the story. And so when it opened in 1874, the first patient was a 14-year-old female with epilepsy. Back then, there was a laundry list of reasons families could drop people off at the asylum. And they didn't even need to be legitimate reasons. They would just dump family members there. And you have to consider too, back in the 1800s, we didn't have Social Security. And so people, if the family member became a burden, a financial burden, and the family couldn't take care of the person, sometimes dropping them off at the asylum was the best and safest place for them, because they got meals, they were cared for, overcrowded, yes, but they would have, this is a picture of the ballroom. And so I know today asylum has this negative connotation, but for some people, this was the reason why they were alive or they could live. So it's now called the Ridges. And when Ohio University purchased the property, there was actually a contest to name the sprawling area. And so the name that won was the Ridges. And so I'll use the names interchangeably. But the Athens Lunatic Asylum, 4,000 acres, it's huge, 78 buildings, at least 3 cemeteries are on the property. There are 1,930 people buried on the property. Unfortunately, they didn't inscribe names on the tombstones. Sometimes it would be just, it would just be a number. And so we don't know who's buried there because the records of the people who were patients are sealed, and they're sealed for 50 years. And so you can, if you believe you have a family member who's there, you can write and have records unsealed. But for the most part, we don't know who these people are. Everything was going fine at the Athens Lunatic Asylum in terms of weren't in the news, there wasn't publicity. A lot of these asylums were not run well. They weren't very well regulated, but for the most part, you didn't really know it because it wasn't newsworthy. until 1977. 1977, we have Billy Milligan. Billy Milligan, this is his mugshot. I lost the name up for it there. Billy was not a great guy. He committed felonies, in and out of trouble, and in 1970s, he raped 3 women on the campus of Ohio University. And when he went to jail, his defense, they were court-appointed defense attorneys. His defense was that he was not guilty because he suffered, they now call it dissociative identity disorder, but he claimed, and his defense claimed, that he had multiple personalities. So multiple personality disorder was the defense, and that he had 3 personalities, and he couldn't be held responsible for committing these rapes because the person who committed it was unknown to the other 2 personalities, and which sounds far-reaching, but Billy actually was the first person to be acquitted based on this defense. Didn't mean he was allowed out. He was actually institutionalized, and he went to several asylums, and he ended up at the Athens Lunatic Asylum. Several doctors actually saw him, and the range for how many personalities he had ranges from 3 to 24. He ultimately was discharged, found to be not a threat to society. And so he was actually discharged from the lunatic asylum, and he lived a life. People didn't know where he was, and he died young, 59 years old, of cancer on his sister's property. So that made the news. And so you have people who are like, hey, let's go visit the sanatorium. Billy's not really the reason why people want to get into the Ridges. It's Margaret Schilling. And I want to actually play this. Whoops. So I'm going to get out of this. Don't want to read it. Oops. And I'm going to open another screen. I apologize. I should have had this opened beforehand. But and I need to go back to the StreamYard to save a different screen, right? So I'm going to stop sharing. Hi. Now I'm going to present again. I'm going to share my screen, share it, and we're going to go to.
Yeah, I think it's share window, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Can you see the lost patients?
No.
Yep, there it is. Hold
Okay.
on 1 second.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to the video.
I want to go there.
I do too. Oh, crap. Why am I not going to the video? Where's the video? There it is.
Oh, you lost it.
I lost it. Here we go.
When you talk about the Ridges in Athens, Ohio, the one thing that pops up most is the story about the stain. It is true that a woman passed away, laid down on the floor in an abandoned part of the attic. Her body wasn't recovered for at least 6 weeks. And when it was, since she had taken all of her clothes off, folded them up neatly on the windowsill, and then laid down on the floor, some people believe intentionally dying of hypothermia, the body left a stain in the cement. Until we left the Ridges, nobody really knew that body stain was there. Ohio University took over, and their maintenance people and their engineers and even office workers began to visit the stain. And I knew the first time I laid eyes on it, I got to take pictures of the stain about 5 years after it happened. There was still a lot of detail in the print, as it were. And I remember thinking, man, this is a human body stain of a dead person in a state mental institution, abandoned. oh God, when the rest of the world finds out this is here, they're going to be lined up down Court Street to see it. I was kind of right.
That's just right. I mean,
Yeah.
Wow. Where do you go with that? Right. So let me go back to the share screen.
It's like the bloodstains when we toured Carnton Plantation in Franklin, Tennessee, the bloodstains around by all the windows from where they were operating on the Civil War soldiers. I mean, they are soaked into the wood floors.
Mm-hmm.
But
they are, right? And they can actually tell you about it. Mm-hmm. So this is Margaret Schelling, and Margaret Schelling did die at the Ridges. She was 53 years old. She was married. She had one son. We don't know why she was at the Ridges because her records are sealed and there's very little out there. In fact, I tried to find where she was buried and I can't even find like a cemetery that she was buried at. So she probably is buried on the property. But she was very friendly. People loved her who worked there, and she was very friendly. She was not deaf, which some reporting has is that she was deaf, but she had full access to the grounds. So she could wander about and go about her day. And on December 2nd, 1978, they noticed that she wasn't in her usual spot at breakfast time, and they didn't really think anything of it. And then that evening, she wasn't there for dinner. And that's when they started looking for her. And like the man said in the video, it took 42 days to find her. And she was found up in the attic, the turret, that part that I told you at the end of the hallways. Each hallway ends with the turret. She had made her way up to the attic part, and the attic was not insulated. And we're in the winter. And so her body was found in January, and she had decomposed. Her clothes were neatly folded. She was found naked on the floor laying there. And her cause of death was ruled as natural causes, a heart attack caused from exposure to the cold. And people question that because they're like, well, how did she have a heart attack if her clothes were neatly folded? Well, when you're experiencing the extreme cold, you actually experience hot flashes. And so she could have been hot, and we don't know what her illness was, why she was there, but she stripped off all her clothing and laid down and ultimately died. This room, even though it wasn't insulated and it was very cold because we're in January in Ohio, but the sun beat in on it. So you've got the cold, you've got the sun, you've got all of these conditions, and it created what is called the stain. And the stain is her body outline that was found. And people, like to interpret it and think, oh my, how could this not be something paranormal or otherworldly when it's really just science? And so they actually, what it was is as her body was decomposing, the fat from her body caused this imprint. But then when they came in to clean it, the cleaning products actually enhanced it. Kind of made it so that it's permanent. And so there is the stain, that is what it's called. And it is it's in the attic of the building. And unfortunately, it's not part of the tour because, like I said, it's very difficult to get access here. But yeah, Philip, I mean, this is something y'all should be writing letters and asking, and showing them how respectful you are with your investigations and everything to try and get in there. But it is a working university. They use all of the buildings, and that is the Ridges. So now I wanted to ask something a little up Heather's alley with the ghost towns. And so I have Bodie Ghost Town. And in California, it became a California historical landmark in 1961. It became the Bodie State Historic Park in 1962. It is an old mining town. Over 200,000 people visit it annually, and the fee is $5 for adults, $3 for children. There is a museum on the property that has also a small nominal fee, but we have a ghost town. 1875, Wild West. This town was named after W.S. Bodie, Bodey. They misspelled his name, who was a wealthy man from New York who never got a chance to see the town. And we're in the gold rush. And so people came out to the West looking for gold, and they built this city, this town, not really city, but a town. It was said to be one of the top 5 populated towns in California in this time period. From 1879 to 1880, it had 10,000 people living there, 2 churches, 2 newspapers, telegraph station, post office, 22 operating mines, brothels, saloons, houses, everything a town could want, right? And then in 1892, there was a fire, and a good chunk of the town was destroyed. But we still had the gold rush. We had money coming through. We had the glory days of California in terms of exploration. And so they rebuilt the town, only for it to burn down in 1932. And that was really the end of Bodie as a town. Sadly, it was a little boy playing with matches who started the fire. And we have this ghost town that has these gorgeous, I want to go, I've never been, but now I do, because how can you just not love this scenery? This is beautiful. There are over 100 buildings. It is in what is called arrested decay, which means they repair the rot, but they do not replace it. So it is as it is. You can see this car is all rusted out. And it's just beautiful. Beautiful town. Look at the church, and you can go and visit. But is there a curse? The curse of Bodie Ghost Town. So this curse started where the park rangers started receiving letters apologizing from people who visited and stole things. Because, when people, I'm going to flip back. When, you go out here and you see, well, what's the harm of taking some nails? What's the harm of stealing the piano? Yes, somebody stole the piano, pulled the pickup truck up, loaded it, and drove off. And they stole it. And all of a sudden, things were happening. People were writing letters. They were returning. The piano hasn't returned, by the way, but they were returning items so that they could shake the curse. Some might say like the Pharaoh's curse, the mummy's curse. I apologize profusely for stealing this item. Please accept my apology. Please take it back. And they would start receiving things from people. But the great thing about the curse, as most curses are, there is no curse. It actually was the brilliant, I say brilliant, I think the state park rangers now say, ooh, we should have thought this through a little bit more. A park ranger came up with the idea to combat the theft that was happening. When the piano drove off in the pickup truck, they were like, this has got to stop. And so they came up with this idea of the curse, and they wrote the letters, and they mailed the letters, some of them with items, and it was popular. But unfortunately, when they received the letter, especially when it came with an item that was purported to be stolen, it had to initiate a police report. And so the park rangers became inundated with paperwork, because they had to file police reports. And so now they're begging people, please don't mock us in our brilliance and write us letters about the curse that, oh, by the way, doesn't exist. But that's okay, because ghost towns and the Wild West, they are so uniquely American and Americana that you still got to go because it's beautiful. Look at it. This is gorgeous. Even though it is misspelt. The name is misspelt. I love this story. And I almost actually, my mom passed away in August, and I'm going through photographs, old photo albums, and they had it's not a standard size Polaroid. It's a little bitty Polaroid in an album that I was taking out and scanning in so I could have copies. And there's actually pictures of my mom and dad on the boats that actually go in and out of the canals. The Island of the Dolls, Isla de las Muñecas, they did not visit, but this is the Island of the Dolls. How could we not talk about the island, right? It's outside Mexico City. It's south of Mexico City. You need a boat to access it. Tours are about 4 hours because you have to take this long boat ride there and see the island and then the boat ride back. It costs starting about $100, but it is unfortunately become like party central. It's like spring break sometimes with the parties, with the mariachi bands and the alcohol and the festive nature that we kind of lose sight as to what is the Island of the Dolls. The entrance fee to get on the islands is 20 pesos, which today, because I computed this today via Google, $1.17 US dollars to get in. And so we have Island of the Dolls from 1943. And so Isla de las Muñecas is an agricultural area that was raised up in canals. And so it's this weaving of canals, and it's built up for agricultural, for planting, harvesting, right? And so it's not an actual island. It's a man-made island. And that it's called a chunapa, where fertile land is built up, and it dates back to the Mesoamerican period. And so square plots were created where people could farm them. And it's surrounded by these ditches and these canals. And the ditches and the canals are not that very deep. And so it's like very shallow boats that go and travel. And so the boat ride there is about 2 hours, and then you can tour the island. The island itself is not all that big, and then you take the boat ride back. And so it is the area, not the island, but the area, the agricultural area, is also a World Heritage Site. So we have two urban legends that are split on the creation or the inspiration of this island. And so I'm going to go through both versions. So the first version is that we have Don Juan Santa Barrera moving to this area. He got divorced, left his wife. For some reason, he moved to this man-made island, and he lived in a one-room structure. And one day he came across the body of a girl, a dead girl, in the canal. And he pulled her to shore, and at night, after he found her, he would be haunted by her calls. I want my doll. I want my doll. And so it just became so much that one day he found a doll. And to appease her, hoping that the calls for I want my doll would end, he hung the doll up for her. And he presumed actually that the doll he found was hers. And he strung it in a tree, but unfortunately she continued to haunt him his entire life. And so he would populate the island with dolls, parts of dolls, doll pieces, so forth. The second story is, it begins years earlier. So the first story is Don Juan is walking the island and he discovers this girl dead in the ditch. The second story is that years earlier, there were 3 girls who are playing, and they're playing in the canal, and one of the girls drowns and she dies. And so when Don Julian moves to the island and moves into his shed, he starts hearing her cries. I want my doll. I want my doll. And one day, Don Julian discovers a doll and he hangs it up. So we don't know the origin story. So it's either these three girls were playing, one drowns, or Don Julian is out on the island and finds this deceased girl. Doesn't really matter, I think, because the focus is the dolls, because the dolls have taken over the island. 4,000 plus dolls are on this island. For 50 years, Don Julian added dolls to the island, and he considered himself the caretaker of the island. It's unclear whether he actually owned the land or not, but he was the caretaker, and that's what he called himself, caretaker of the island, and probably never the owner, which is kind of important. And so he took care of this little girl's island, and he would go dumpster diving to find dolls and bring them back to the island and erect them all over the island. In 2001, Don Julian died of either, and this is another urban legend where it's kind of sketchy, what he died from. He either died from a heart attack, a suicide, he committed suicide, or a mysterious illness. So we've got three possibilities. 2001, he dies, and it's reported, air quotes, reported that his body was found in the exact location that the little girl's body was found 50 years earlier. I don't know. I don't think so. Probably not. But again, it's the island, right? It's the dolls that are haunting this island. This isn't necessarily Don Julian or the girl. Today, the island is part of the booming business of this art agricultural area. And so his shed has become a rustic museo or museum. So it's a rustic museum, and a photograph of Don Julian is displayed with his favorite doll, and there's dolls everywhere. It is a creepy collection of dolls. Guinness Book of World Records has named the Island of the Dolls as the largest haunted doll collection. Now, this is also important because they have an asterisk next to it. They say that in the postscript that it is impossible to prove if the dolls are haunted, and not stating if ghosts exist and are possessing the dolls. The collection is one of the largest claimed to be haunted collection of dolls, numbering in the thousands, and there are over 4,000 dolls in this area. This island also is part of ecotourism because Mother Nature has claimed the dolls, and you can see here that the pathways along the island are cleared for the tourists to walk and everything, but the dolls are kept as they were, and so they're not clean, they're not maintained, and so you have dolls deteriorating. Mother Nature is mutilating dolls. Some of the limbs are falling off. The mold is growing. The spores are on the bodies. There's cobwebs, insect nests, mold, dirt, burn marks on the dolls. And so that also adds another element of creepiness to it. Locals report hearing the dolls crying at night. During the day, they claim that the dolls move with their eyes opening and closing, which, that can be, if you have a doll that has been exposed to the natural elements, the inner workings inside can break down and so forth. So, I don't know, but it's just, there's so many questions, but it's the urban legends around it are compelling, right? We love this story. And so no one knows for sure if there was a girl, because we don't have records of a girl. We don't have records of a girl dying there. But Don Julian's created this memorial of respect to some spirit because he believed that something was haunting him. And so that's what makes this dark tourism, is that it isn't possibly linked to the death of a girl, but he was haunted and he did die on the island. And this consumed his life. What remains is a respectful devotion to his obsession. Is it haunted? Probably not. Again, this is haunting, maybe not haunted. But this somber island is located inside and insulated from this bustling city. Mexico City is huge, right? Very populous. And the somber experience on the island, if you get away from the party boats and the mariachi bands and just the festivities of it, and you hear the silence and you hear the birds chirping and you hear the insects that cohabitate amongst them, right? That's enough. It really is. And then finally, our last story is Chernobyl. And Chernobyl is at the time, it was in the Ukraine. It's now part of the Soviet Union. Chernobyl is the nuclear meltdown of 1986. The tourism has people want to go to a radioactive site. And pre-COVID, annually, it hit 124,000 people. COVID definitely impacted it, but it has rebounded. It costs between 100 and 129 days US dollars for the day to travel there or to experience it. You can only go in certain parts. You have to wear long sleeve shirts, pants, closed-toed shoes because it's deemed safe. I'm not going there, but you might. Even my daughter, who was like age 5, she was so preoccupied with Chernobyl. Even she's not going there. But Chernobyl also is another ecotourism site where we see Mother Nature taking over. And so, Chernobyl. It's sad in a way, right? So on April 26th, the number 4 nuclear reactor had an ultimate meltdown of the core. And it occurred during a safety test, and the explosion killed 2 engineers immediately. And then the aftermath left 237 workers injured. 28 died within 3 months of radioactive exposure, and 14 more within 10 years. And wow, this was a huge tragedy. So a month later, less than a month, a couple weeks later in May, the open air reactor core caught fire. And so ultimately they believed that it was a design flaw and human error that caused the meltdown. The immediate deaths, 28 firemen and emergency workers within 3 months after. This was a town of nearly 50,000 people. And it was actually an up and coming modern town because you had the business, the jobs of working at the nuclear plant were lucrative. And so there was the amusement park. And this is what people identify Chernobyl with, or one of the things is the amusement park. And the amusement park was set to open. And so you had people who were very excited. And then they had this nuclear meltdown. They had to evacuate people within 36 hours after the explosion. And it was 4 hours to evacuate them. 1,200 buses were used to get 50,000 plus people out of it. And it just, wow, right? The area around the nuclear plant is called the Red Forest because the trees surrounding the plants, the nuclear plants, turned a brighter ginger color because of the radioactive material. After the meltdown, the reactors actually weren't shut down immediately. They had to do a staged taking offline of the reactors. So there were 4 reactors. Number 4 is the one that had the meltdown in 1986. 1991, reactor 2 was shut down. 1996, reactor 1 was shut down. And then in 2000, reactor 3 was shut down. So it was still supplying power. And the Chernobyl exclusion zone is that immediate area. It's a 1,000 square mile restricted area around the nuclear plants. And the wildlife is thriving there. Mother Nature has definitely taken over the area. In 2019, it became a huge destination because of an HBO series. All you need is Netflix or HBO, Peacock, somebody to make a miniseries. Billy Milligan actually is a miniseries also, I think, on Apple. But they had this miniseries, and tourism jumped 30 to 40% in that year alone. And you have to show a passport to get in, like actual passport, not your driver's license. You have to be dressed a certain way. You have to adhere to a list of things because it is very much still regulated, because it can be dangerous if you go off into the areas that you should not be. And so it has created what are called the stalkers. And the stalkers are this subculture of young people who try to sneak into the exclusion zone and take photographs. They get drone footage and cameras and so forth. Very much not advisable. Please don't do it. Wow, don't do it. But because we have this drone footage and things, people claim now that they see things moving. And how could that happen? So is the area haunted? This is another one of those instances where great death, great tragedy, and it was tragedy of the engineers working there at the nuclear plants, and then the fire and emergency people who died years later from being exposed to the radioactive material. So it is very dangerous. And reactor number 4, which had the meltdown, was actually sealed, and it's in a sarcophagus. So they sealed it. And so the seal will last 30 years until a new seal has to be created and built over it to protect all of the countries. And think about it, think about wind. Philip, you were talking about how it was windy up in Atlanta. Wind carries everything. And so it's very important that it remains sealed. But again, the amusement park is this iconic reminder of just how dangerous it can be. People who lived in the town were actually evacuated to a new town. A new town was built. And this new town, they actually created, a memorial, beautiful semicircular memorial that has the people who died, their names etched in it, so that people can still remember what happened. There's a series. How I got started was, of course, I was binge watching during COVID. Who wasn't, right? And so I was on Netflix, and I found Dark Tourist, which is 2018. So I watched it in 2020. He's from New Zealand. This is David Ferrier. It was one season, it was 8 episodes, and it was called Dark Tourist. And that's where I learned about dark tourism. And it's each episode is a continent. He does the US twice, and he goes out, and it's not just necessarily locations, but also cities. So for instance, one of the US episodes is New Orleans and the vampire culture. He's okay in it, but the locations are pretty cool. So I would recommend watching it. Just check it out and see. But again, there's so many locations, and honorable mentions, right? We've got Alcatraz, The Rock, maximum security prison, opened in 1934, closed 1963. We got Al Capone, a lot of ghost hunting shows, go to Alcatraz and take a peek and see. We've got Greyfriars Kirkyard, and a kirkyard is the Scottish word for cemetery if the cemetery is surrounding a church. So Greyfriars Kirkyard is supposedly the most haunted cemetery in the world. And that one I am going to write a blog about, because that one's just, it's got a possession in it. And somebody dies. So there's your tease. Leave you with that. And then, of course, Tower of London. I didn't go into that. That one is discussed at length in Scariest Places in the World, because, oh my stars, where do we start? And I need to flip to it, because this is actually a picture of, let me get to it. I've tagged everything in my book except for Tower of London, which is kind of funny. But come on. Oh, I bet it's in the front. Hold on. It's like we're trying to draw this out so I can talk longer about everything. But there we go. Okay, so this is Margaret Pool down there in the corner. And I'll just talk about Margaret real quickly, because Tower of London, oh, wow. It's not just the Bloody Tower. It's several buildings where horrible crimes were committed. The kings, plural. Oh, man, they were horrible. Anne Boleyn. We've got Lady Jane Grey. We've got Arabella Stewart. We've got Guy Fawkes. We've got the princes. Oh my God, the princes. That's heartbreaking. We've got the bear, the grizzly bear that's seen there. But Mary Poole, she was the Countess of Salisbury, and she was imprisoned for trying to being party to the overthrowing of the crown. And this is in 1541. 67 years old. She was imprisoned for 2.5 years. And when she was imprisoned in Tower Green, or at least that's where her screams are heard now, haunting. But when she went to the gallows to be executed, and back then for the executions, there were only 5 types of executions. So it was either a beheading, which was the most dignified. That was the royals were beheaded. 2 were the hangings, and that was the lower class. The lower class was hanged. 3 was firing squad, and that was for spying and desertion. So that was during a war. 4 was burning at the stake, which we know is heresy, religion. And there was actually only 2 burning of the stakes there. Or 5 when you were hanged, drawn, and quartered. And that was the most brutal. Guy Fawkes, he was number 5. He was hanged, he was drawn, he was quartered. Most brutal. But Margaret Poole was to be beheaded. And so she was taken to the gallows, and she refused to kneel. She was like, I'm not kneeling. I am the Countess. Why would I kneel? And so the hangman, the executioner, rather, because it wasn't a hanging, it was to behead. He was like, okay, if you're not going to kneel, I'm still going to get you. And so she was actually a victim of a botched execution. He slashed at her, and she's got like this blood going everywhere, body part, whatever. And she was running around the platform screaming, and he chased her down to kill her. And that is Margaret Poole, one of the least likely for you to know of, because there's so many, but the Tower of London. So these are my honorable mentions. There's so many more. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to stop. Oh, I know. So I'm trying to get so much in, and it's like, But see, I did right there.
So the big question is, why are we so drawn to these horrific places? What does it say about us paranormal people? Because I don't think your average Joe or Joanne or in between want to run out to an insane asylum where, horrible things happen. But we would be like, how fast can we get there?
Sign me up.
Right. Maybe I just only hang out with people who are like that. But what's interesting is I'll be out talking to somebody in my daily life, and someone will divulge to me that they have gone to Trans-Allegheny or have been to, they're just a draw. And I think part of it is mortality, when you're looking at your death, and genealogy, if you want to know if you had a relative there. Also just kind of different reasons. The architecture of insane asylums it's beautiful.
Yeah.
The Kirkbride model was gorgeous with the wicker rocking chairs, and they would be out on the veranda, and it's just beautiful. And we don't have a lot of old buildings in the US, and so we're not like other countries who've had to repurpose, redesign, and use what we had. We just go and chop down the next forest and build. But I think people want to see, and they're curious. And in some of these also are just reminders of the brutality of humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's amazing how many more people are interested in it than we know, because I've been on a couple job interviews recently, and I know the last one I was on, 90% of the interview, we spent talking about the paranormal once they found out I was a writer.
Really?
Yeah. It's like,
that's
so
awesome.
much for the interview.
Yeah, because it's fascinating, and it's so unlike what we see. It's like the ghost towns. I went when I was a kid, and there are pictures, but I don't remember it. And in the Wild West is just this popular culture kind of thing to me. Whereas to go out there and to see what happens when towns die, because where I live in Florida, towns aren't dying; we're booming. In growth. And Atlanta, same thing, booming. And it's so different. Yeah, right. And then, and it shouldn't limit us. That's one of the reasons why I'm always hesitant to talk about Chernobyl, because people then want to get into discussion of, nuclear energy, bad because of the meltdown. 3 Mile Island, bad because of the meltdowns. And it's like, okay, let's add up how many decades ago that was.
Yeah. And let's look at who was running the place.
Right. And let's look around and see how much coal we've got left, because we don't have a lot. So we need sustainable energy, and that's going to have to be nuclear energy with wind power. And, and so, and I think more people nowadays, because we've gotten so far removed from the meltdowns, that they don't really they're fascinated by the growth and the ecotourism, and how do you evacuate 50,000 people?
Well, but if you watch the documentary about Chernobyl, they were lying to those people until they absolutely couldn't lie anymore, until their flesh was falling off. But what was it, the drug that they could take? Iodine or something? Iodine pills?
Yeah, iodine pills.
But they didn't tell them until they were putting them on the buses. It was just a horrible situation. And the lying made it worse there for the people. The government lying as to what was going on and how
it's liability.
Yeah.
Because eventually people are going to start asking, why did my loved one die?
Yeah. Why did I have to leave my home and everything in it?
Because they did. They up and left. And it's the same thing with and I don't know if it's Hashima or Hashima Island. But they would put in those apartments like families of 5 sleeping in the closets and stuff. And the day came when they were like, okay, you're leaving the island. Time to go. And dishes are still there, still stacked and everything. And it's hard to fathom, because when we don't live in that type of world, because we're fortunate to not.
Today, tomorrow may
today.
be different.
Right. Well, yeah. No comment. But but it's just, it's just so fascinating.
But I saw a video, and I can't remember if it was on YouTube or something, about the tours that they're doing in Chernobyl, bus tours going in, and there are rules and everything, and they, there's someone standing there with a Geiger counter,
Yeah, because they have to go through. There's several stations, radioactive stations that they have to go through and everything, and of course, there's some fool who wants to carry the rock home.
Oh yeah.
And the piece of there's always somebody. Yeah. And
just don't put it in your pocket. It could be bad news.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, but people are drawn to it, and the thrill of it.
No thanks. No, that's one thrill. I mean, I'll take a ghost. That's fine. Nuclear waste, I think I'll pass.
Yeah.
And the animals, though, they're coming back, but their mutations and genetic mutations are insane, and the animals are spreading out, and breeding with the good animals, and it's just going further and further out in the mutations. I was watching something about the wildlife in Chernobyl is coming back. Yeah, but they're all screwed up, and got these horrible things going on. And then there's some animals who are should be dead with cancer, and they're not. They've gotten an immunity.
Yeah, the resilience.
I mean, it's fascinating what's come about from all that. But when you think about the animals spreading further out with your mutations and genetic dysfunctions and things, it's like, that's kind of scary.
Yeah. Well, look at Iceland. It had the volcano eruption, and they had to evacuate the whole town. Those people can't move back.
Yeah.
And so the country is responsible now for housing them, building them houses, building a town. And thankfully, it's just other things keep me up, but this does not.
Yeah. There's enough to keep us awake at night.
There really is. There really is.
Yeah. We did have a few questions. Bob had asked, are there any reports of owners faking info or history to get people to come and spend their money?
Probably. Don't doubt it. And I think that I think that's why I like how patient records are sealed.
Yeah.
Because it just, oh man, I'm not going to name the place where I've gone to do investigations, and there's patient records all over the place. And it's like, really? So, and then sensationalizing totally to get more people to be there. And I think that's why I like, when you talk about the history of a location, go for the historical aspect.
Yes.
And try to find personal stories about the location to kind of make it more of a fulfilling experience, instead of relying on that fake history or those fake stories. And I will say that one of the positives with the internet is that they're easy to debunk and be called out.
Yeah.
Or easier. But definitely, money. It's money, honey.
And the stories get embellished about these places over the years, and the storytelling. But there are some that have just gotten out of control. Now, there's a book, and Lisa, you probably know, it's that Folklore Nevermore, written by that lady that lives in Atlanta. I'm not going to mention her name. I'm not a huge fan of her personally. But the book is good because it takes some of these locations and breaks down the story and then puts the facts to it. And one of them's the big one in Kentucky, the tuberculosis place,
the deaths.
And it breaks down what's said about the place and what's real about the place. I mean, it's still haunted and horrible things happen, but some of the things are just way over exaggerated.
Mm-hmm. And it
Not
doesn't.
in this field.
I know. Imagine that.
And I don't think that by saying comparing one death to 1,000 deaths,
Yeah.
why should that make any more difference? One
Yeah.
person still died.
Yeah.
One person was still treated horribly, you know, and so unless it's the Tower of London where you've just got, oh my gosh, a lot of people were killed there.
Yeah.
And the bear, oh my gosh. So, you know, it shouldn't have to matter the number.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that when you do a little history before or research beforehand and know some of the history, to be able to say, wow, this is, you know, insane asylums were, you know, good intentions, but not, you know, it's, yeah. So,
yeah, it's sad because so many of them weren't regulated. And the people were overworked, underpaid, horrible working conditions, and you get unscrupulous doctors in who want to experiment and have a guinea pigs at their disposal that no one cares about, knows about, been dumped there. I mean, you're going to have horrible things.
you are.
Yep.
And a lot of places we go, we may not even know how horrible the things were that happened there. That's another thing you got to look at. It's like we don't know what all happened. We may be going to a haunted house location, but what else could have happened there that's not written down in the history books or passed down in stories? It's like I always tell people, you never know what you're going to step into when you step onto a property or walk on property.
Right.
I think there's some questions coming in.
Yep, I have quite a few questions I have saved. Bob asked earlier, question on Bodie Ghost Town. The way we have tulpas and thought forms, is there same situation for land such as Bodie, that you have a made-up curse that becomes true haunting or curse following the storyline of the made-up story of the curse? I know in my research I've come across many instances of that, especially when they do reenactments, but I'm not sure if you've encountered anything.
I'm reading the question again.
That's a good question.
It is a good question.
Because, you know, there's the concentration of the same thoughts forms that energies.
And I'm thinking about, right. And I'm thinking about locations where they have, like, by the battlefield up in Atlanta, where I live by Kennesaw Mountain, and they would do reenactments. And so they would you have this belief of history happening one way, and they do reenactments at least twice a year.
Yeah.
And so you're leaving that imprint. And I wonder if maybe, you know, some intelligent entity is like, well, they don't want to hear my story, but like this story. So I think it's plausible. And I think also, and that's why it frustrates me. When people go to Wikipedia and are like, oh my God, the gospel. And it's like, somebody gets the fact wrong in something and they perpetuate that story. And then you go back and you find the real story. And it's like, well, that wasn't the story. But it is kind of cool when actually, if you sit and you listen and you pay attention, and that's what's the real story is what's being shown to you. And that's why I've investigated with a lot of people who don't want to know the history before they investigate a location, because they don't want to be tainted with that. That's a really good question.
Yeah, similar occurrences occurred in Bonnie Springs, which is no longer in existence, but because they did the noontime showdown and the shootout in Main Street, that there was a lot of, I don't know if it was residual energy or if the spirits just liked it, but there were a lot of reports of strange things happening because of what was happening, you know, for the show.
Yeah.
It's like trigger objects, so to speak. We play Civil War music and do things to try to see if we can elicit some reaction on investigations. We need to get through these questions, though. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I know I didn't realize what time it was. Holy crap, time flies. And the questions keep coming in. So Bob also wants to know, he thought they burned a lot of witches in London.
They did, but not at the Tower of London. Yeah, because not everybody, that's a generalization. People have this belief that all the executions happened at the Tower of London. Now, they happened at other locations throughout England, but at the Tower itself, only 2.
Okay. And then Robin wants to know, our Chamber of Commerce is jumping on this bandwagon. I know in Goldfield they are.
Yeah. Oh, I think so.
Not in the South.
Not in the South. Oh, what is the location? It's up in Massachusetts. What house is it? Yes, they are, because there is this house that the name escapes me. It has a lot of history with it, has a lot of paranormal activity with it, not in Salem, but the Historic Society realized that it needed a new roof, and they got quotes and realized that the roof was incredibly expensive. And who pays readily to do investigations? Well, paranormal investigation teams. Exactly. And so they make more money allowing, thank you, Oliver House. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Bob. They figured out that they make more money with the paranormal investigations and the storytelling and the tours and that to pay for it so that they can preserve this house, preserve history. And it's a nice marriage and it works. But unfortunately, like Philip says, in the South, they don't, because, but they're going to come around, because where's the money?
Yeah. And that's the problem too, is in the South, they either don't want to have a part of it or they want too much money. Because I know I've talked about this before.
Like
St. Augustine Lighthouse wants $5,000 a night to do an official investigation. And when you ask why, their answer is they were on ghost hunters.
Well, so we're a million places that we've been.
No comment.
I mean, I might have gotten a bad person who talked to me on the phone, but I was shocked, and I've heard that I'm not the only person who's heard that. So it was amazing.
They don't need the money is one reason there, the lighthouse.
That could be their excuse not to get people there.
Yeah, there are other places. There are other venues. And I think some of it's just educating and showing that, because unfortunately some of these shows do activities, do reenactments that are dangerous.
Yes. Liability
insurance. We're not going to have the voodoo ceremony, right? You don't do that unless that's your religion, or that you're bringing the experts with you.
Yeah.
And I think that when you educate them, so many places can be like the Oliver House and preserve history. But I don't know if it's going to be Chambers.
Do you believe that the nuclear exposure heightens the sensitivity to paranormal? He's interviewed several people whom were exposed, and they led a normal life before exposure.
Probably, because it's a toxin.
Yeah.
And just think of drugs and heighten, how you open yourself up to other things, heightened awareness, or you're opening yourself up, and it's just changing your state. It's kind of like we don't investigate with alcohol.
Yeah.
We don't investigate with the vape that's got the in it. We don't even smoke cigarettes, but I think so. And I think that there could possibly be more research done once the sites are more accessible and safer to go to for that. But right now, you couldn't pay me to go to Chernobyl. You just can't. No. And, but I think that there's other places we can start with maybe less exposure.
Yeah. I mean, we've got enough lead paint in this country. That's enough exposure in some of these old places. But, there have been studies. It seems like people who are more sensitive, empathic, have abilities, as we say, are more environmentally sensitive to things such as pollen, allergens, EMF. I mean, so there is some correlation in those situations that people are more sensitive to things. So if you're exposed to radiation, I mean, you're going to be more sensitive. It's like people who encounter, that say they have UFO encounters and then suddenly start being more aware of ghosts and spirits or apparitions or paranormal occurrences. It's like there's always seems to be this tie and correlation in these things. It's just interesting. We don't know how it all works, but
right.
There is a. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Has anyone inquired as to the investigating the mental health hospital in Iowa? I'm not sure which one, but I think I know which one they're talking about. It held notorious murderer and psychopaths.
Oh, fun.
Is that okay, I gotta Google it real fast before I say something.
I know, I was about to do that too.
It's like at the Milledgeville here in Georgia. It's a state asylum that everyone is just dying to go investigate, but they will absolutely not allow it. I even had a really good inside connection, and they said they can't. There's too much liability. Some of the buildings are too far gone, and they won't let any. Oh God, echo! They won't let anyone in. I mean, even with this connection we had, he says, because if we let you in, we'll have to start letting everyone in. But that's on everyone's bucket list, but we'll never get to do it.
Oh, I would love to go there because I love Flannery O'Connor.
Yeah, is it the Edinburgh Manor in Scotch Grove?
Iowa
is the one I'm coming up with in Iowa that's been abandoned. Otherwise, all the others are still active.
Must be. I've got cobwebs on my face. Somebody's here. Oh, sorry.
I wrote an article on that once.
No.
Moving on. What is your biggest oh shit moment or hell no moment that either one of us have had or any one of us have had?
Oh. Which one? The black mass coming out the ceiling. That one stands out.
I know mine was when I was using the Ovilus, and I'm still skeptical of the device. I'm not sure how it works, but I wandered away from my group, didn't realize I wandered away, and all of a sudden, Death, Devil, Demon, Sacrifice alone on the Ovilus, and I said, "Well, who are you going to sacrifice?" And it said, "You." Just as I felt something run its finger down my back, and I turned around and realized I was alone.
That would be an oh shit moment.
That was an oh shit moment.
That would be right. And I think that the reason why is I have moments where I'm like something really, really cool happens, but I try not to overreact. And so I'm like, that's kind of
that ain't right.
and I think, and it's funny because because I've had really cool things happen. And then it's afterwards that I'm like going through it and I'm like, holy crap. Oh my God. Right. I'm really bad. My memory is like really bad. So I like write down a lot of things so I can remember what does happen. But the stories that I retell are not the ones where I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, it's more of, I was talking to a coworker and I was talking about how ghost radar, and it was how people say, oh, it's because it's capturing the radio waves. So of course it's going to come up with words and, whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, here are my two comebacks for that. First one is that Marietta, Georgia has the city cemetery allowed Confederate soldiers to be buried there. The Confederacy wanted to be in Marietta, wanted the Marietta to be their headquarters, and the Cole family had largest farm, and they said no. And so that's how they moved to Virginia. And so that property actually was sold for Union soldiers to be buried. So City Cemetery has Civil War area, and it also has the slave area. The slaves who died in the Civil War, who were fighting in the Confederacy because their master was there. And I'm wandering around, and because I love cemeteries, and I found my way to this one area, and I was trying to read the gravestones and everything, and I couldn't really figure out where I was at. And slave came over on the radar. And I happened to look up, and there was the marker that said this, slave cemetery. So I was like, come on. Okay. But in that one, okay, maybe somebody's on their little CB trying to send out the, slaves. Like the second one is we were doing an investigation at this house in Decatur, maybe 1950s house. So it was a house that the parents owned. They were in their 70s, rented it to their children who were living in it, roommate situation, and it was under renovation. So where you walked in was the dining room because it's being renovated. And I'm not the intake person. And so I'm just trying to set up equipment, and I'm just standing there, just minding my own business. And of course, I am attracted to shiny stuff. And so I'm looking at the china cabinet, and I'm just like, wow, this is some really cool stuff, because it's got some relics and things. And I'm like looking at this thing. I don't even remember what I was looking at. And I'm just like, ooh, shiny. And across the ghost radar comes Talmadge. And I'm not from Georgia. So I'm like, I don't know who Talmadge is. And I'm like, so I look at it and I go, what's a Talmadge? And the owner, his wife says to me, owners, they both own it. She goes, yeah, Governor Talmadge. My daddy worked for him. He drove him around, and see that thing in the curio cabinet? That was given by Governor Talmadge to my dad. And it was the thing I was staring at.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
Sorry, I got off tangent, but that's
okay. And the institute in Iowa is the Iowa Mental Health Institute in Independence, Iowa.
I don't know anything about it,
no,
but I'm gonna write it
down. Yep. And then the final comment / question. I'm assuming they're watching from Parallax TV. So you guys believe it is better to investigate without psychedelic influences. This is interesting, as I know people on this channel have done this. I agree with sobriety and clear heads is a must for investigations. 100%.
If you're on psychedelics, you're not going to know reality from what's actually happening, I would think. It could be so blurred you wouldn't have your trip.
It opens you up to so many things that you don't want to open up to.
Very vulnerable because you couldn't defend yourself, take care of yourself if you need to, if you need to get out or say a prayer or call on your spirit guides, you wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. So
I'm going to go in a different direction and tell you, since I used to be a lawyer, I'm thinking liability. So it's like, oh my God, I'm not giving you my house because somebody was on whatever. And just the liability isn't worth it. And again, what it does is it makes whatever you find more open to that criticism. It's not controlled. It's not this, it's not that. And unfortunately, we have to play by the scientific rules. Because we don't really have rules in terms of that. And so that's what we go by. And so to make it be more credible is to have these controls, to operate this way. And again, and I'm with Philip. I mean, you say what you want about the Ouija board, but I'm not playing with it because that just my experience, another tangent that you'll get me on an investigation, but but that's okay. You do you.
Yeah. Now there's a some kind of spiritual journey thing where, I don't know, I think it may be Native American based, but they, smoke, is it peyote? What's it called? And then you're supposed to go on this spiritual journey of enlightenment and everything. But that's not an investigation. That's a whole separate ball game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no, that's in our rule books. No alcohol, no influential drugs or anything before an investigation, because a big part of it is liability. Even if it's a fun investigation of a historical site, we're there to get evidence and to do work and be responsible. So
and what's sad is I know several investigators who've left the investigation site to go to their car, and you know what they're doing in their car.
No, that's you boot off the team if that happens. We don't even, because we go to dinner a lot of times, no alcohol at dinner before the investigation. We're all trying to get loaded up on caffeine mostly. So
I know.
And then worry about the bathroom situation later.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So we are all caught up and way past time.
Just time flies when you're having fun.
I'm chatty.
I guess.
I'm not at all.
Close, can you just remind everybody where they can find you and where they can catch your blogs? I noticed it was October 23rd, so we're due for one.
Yeah, I know. Gosh, right. So you can go to www.thehauntedlibrarian.com. And they are really cool. And because again, it's kind of weird stuff. It's a weird take. It's not, I'm not reproducing something that's been written. I try to investigate and research. I love research, and try to come out with something that you don't really know about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Perfect. And go ahead, Philip.
Say one thing. All right. We had an investigation a few weeks ago in Franklin, Tennessee, the Lotes house, which is one of our favorite places to investigate. And we put our first evidence video out. It's on our YouTube channel, Georgia Paranormal Investigations. And I want to say we got some of the most amazing EVPs I have ever gotten in all the years that I've been investigating. I mean, and when you hear these, it's like almost just like, this is not real. Let me assure you, it's all about integrity. They're 100% real, recorded on our DVR cameras, which have audio. And Lisa, you've seen our cameras.
Oh God, man, you've got the stuff.
I mean, they're so amazing. This one woman says, "Hi, it's nice to see you again." I mean, just sentences. So if you guys want to see it, it's best to listen with headphones, but some of them you don't even need headphones. But yeah, it was crazy that night. It looked like nothing was happening. And then we go to review our cameras and we start hearing all this. And we're really good about, all right, check camera 2 to see who was there, to make sure everyone's mouths are seen. It's like, right. That is none of us. That is none of us saying that. So, yeah, which also brings me to this idea we've been talking about. Like, we got these amazing EVPs, but our equipment wasn't reacting. So, all right, what's the theory? Is where are they? How close are they? Are they manipulating the environment? Because not much was reacting. But yet these voices are so prominent. So that's something we can talk about at another.
That's awesome.
We need to do a special show just for that.
Yeah, because it's like, why isn't this reacting? Maybe is it not? They're not emitting an EMF. They're not creating a static field. They're not affecting the temperature. But yet they're saying, "Hi, it's nice to see you again," and answering questions. Mm-hmm. So. Yep. Just something for y'all to think about for next time. Talk amongst yourselves.
No problem. And before we go, do you guys have anything upcoming soon? Any investigations? Any events?
We're going to Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary in April. Mm-hmm. Yes. It was 5 years ago since I've been, and Jerry on my team's been, but the rest of the team hasn't been. And we're just like, can't wait. And they cleaned up death row. So, because it was nasty when I went in there the one time, it was like, yeah. So we're so excited.
That'll be fun and interesting.
The rest of the ones are quiet lately. We've just been getting some some people we've had to try to help out,
Right.
email wise, but residentials are quiet lately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I'll be at Keel Farms this weekend for their Sip and Shop event, doing a book signing. So if you guys are in Southwest Florida, join me over in Plant City Saturday from 10 to 3. I'll be there all day.
Spell Kill.
Can't beat Wine and Ghost at Keel Farms.
Spell Kill Farms.
What was that? Keel. K-E-E-L.
K-E-E-L.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, they're the ones who make the wine from oranges.
Ah,
I want to buy
oranges and strawberries. So yeah. So I'm looking forward to doing an event there, and hopefully, if all goes well, keep your fingers crossed. So we'll have many more events and activities there as well throughout the year. So
yay, very good.
My first time joining them. I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, thank you for joining us today, Lisa. It has been amazing as always. If anyone has any presentations, I'm actually going to automatically book you into our presentation later this year. I think we have an opening for a presentation in October or November, and we'll come up with a topic later. So if anyone has any topic ideas, let us know. I'll run them by her and see what we can do for you. But until then, you can always follow us on Facebook at Ghost Education 101 and watch the replay, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, also at Ghost Education 101. And then every other week we air live on Parallax TV on Facebook as well.
And please share this with all your friends. They need to know about ghosts the proper way.
Exactly. And I've heard a lot of stories lately. So a lot of people are coming to our page asking questions, and they're really enjoying the content that we're providing. So excellent. And I'm loving the new format we have, where we have a guest presentation and then a panel discussion. So next in our rotation is a panel discussion on cryptids and cryptozoology. We'll be joined by Barnaby Jones, Nigel Wright, Todd Neese, and Bob Dowell, as well as Brittany Barbary may be joining us. She's checking her schedule and she's going to let me know, but I'm looking forward to having her on as well, because she has some amazing insight into the field of cryptid research.
Fascinating.
Okay, so I guess that is it. We are caught up on contents. Thank you everyone for watching. And as long as you guys are good, we're good to go.
See you guys in 2 weeks.
Yep. Bye, everyone. Have a great night.